Welcome to The Debate. So imagine, just for a moment, that every single time you wanted to send an email to a new client or a new supplier, your IT department had to spend 3 weeks negotiating server protocols.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be a nightmare.
Right? Setting up security handshakes, mapping format requirements with their IT department. I mean, it sounds absurd, right? Almost comical.
Completely unworkable.
Exactly. Yet when we look at how the global economy handles its most critical commercial documents, the invoices, the purchase orders, the shipping notices, that is precisely how the digital architecture has functioned for decades.
Unfortunately, yes.
But that architecture is fracturing, and it is being rapidly replaced by Peppol. What began as a European public procurement initiative has crossed oceans. I mean, it's become a truly global infrastructure.
Yeah, adopted by governments from Singapore to Australia.
Right, and actively developed by groups like the Business Payments Coalition in the U.S. So Peppol is emerging as the Internet of commercial documents. And the question before us today is how organizations should approach this massive seismic shift.
Which is a huge question.
It is. Is Peppol a strategic, paradigm-shifting transformation that demands immediate, comprehensive C-suite investment? Or is it just a regulatory hoop to jump through where incremental, mandate-driven adoption is the best path forward?
Well, I know where you stand on this.
Yeah, I'm going to argue that Peppol is a foundational infrastructure that organizations must proactively adopt across their entire enterprise right now to unlock operational efficiency and ultimately prepare for future automation.
And I'll argue it is absolutely the latter. Treating Peppol primarily as a compliance-driven network isn't just practical. I mean, it is the only financially responsible way to handle it.
Really? The only way?
Yes. Government mandates act as a necessary forcing function to build the network's value, and organizations should let those mandates dictate their investment timeline.
Okay, well, to truly understand what is at stake here, we have to look past the technical framing that usually surrounds this topic.
Fair enough.
When Peppol comes up in enterprise IT or finance conversations today, it almost always gets shoved into a very narrow box. It's viewed as a specific e-invoicing standard required to do business in a specific country, basically just to avoid a fine.
Right. The compliance box.
Exactly. And that framing might be technically accurate in the short term, but it is strategically blind in the long term. The actual problem Peppol solves is the radical, crippling fragmentation of business-to-business document exchange.
Yeah, the old spaghetti architecture.
Right. Historically, every single digital connection between a buyer and a supplier required a bilateral technical agreement. We are talking about custom electronic data interchange, or EDI connections.
Using AS2 servers or VPN tunnels. It's a mess.
Total mess. We are talking about separate siloed supplier portals where vendors have to manually key in data, or, unstructured emails carrying PDF attachments. This fragmentation inherently limits scale because every new trading partner is essentially a brand new IT project.
Well, look, I completely agree that the historical EDI landscape is a nightmare of point-to-point spaghetti architecture. I don't think anyone defending the compliance-first approach is arguing that the old way was better.
I would hope not.
Right. And Peppol completely bypasses that limitation through its network directory.
Exactly. The service metadata publisher.
Right, but hold on. Before we declare the end of fragmentation, let's unpack this service metadata publisher, or SMP, because that is really the secret sauce of Peppol.
It really is.
People hear the word network, and they immediately think of a massive centralized hub or database that stores everyone's commercial data.
Which it isn't. Not at all. It works almost exactly like the DNS system for the internet, but for businesses.
Right.
SMP with a company's business identifier, like a national tax number, a VAT number, or a corporate registry ID.
And then it routes it.
Exactly. The SMP instantly routes back the exact technical endpoints, the certified access point they use, and the specific document formats that supplier is capable of receiving. You aren't building a custom pipe to the supplier, you're just asking the directory where to drop the package securely.
Just like email.
Yeah, just like email. You don't need a custom technical agreement with a recipient to send them a message. You just need to know they are registered on the network.
It is incredibly elegant. The any-to-any routing protocol solves a massive headache. But here's where we diverge.
Okay, let's hear it.
Acknowledging that the architecture is brilliant does not mean the business case for adopting it preemptively makes sense. The decision to allocate budget, to disrupt internal processes, and to build an integration roadmap should remain firmly grounded in compliance.
I just can't agree with that.
Well, we have to live in the reality of corporate resource allocation. Mandates provide the forcing function for adoption. When an organization builds what I would call a minimum viable connection to satisfy a specific national framework, whether that's the upcoming mandates in France, Germany, or, the existing ones in Australia, they're making the most rational financial choice.
But let me just finish this thought. Preemptively overhauling your entire enterprise architecture for an any-to-any network is a massive overinvestment if your specific supplier base hasn't yet reached a critical mass on that network. But that's exactly the issue. You are building a massive superhighway to a town where nobody owns a car yet.
Precisely. The strategic value naturally follows the compliance mandates, because the mandates are what force the suppliers to buy the cars, so to speak. Therefore, compliance should lead the strategy, not the other way around.
That analogy assumes we only care about the outbound traffic, the cars leaving our town. If you let compliance lead, you only look at one half of the equation.
The required half.
But frankly, it is the significantly less valuable half. Compliance-driven models are almost entirely focused on outbound data sending, your outgoing invoices to government tax authorities or mandated public buyers. But the true, measurable return on investment of Peppol is in accounts payable automation.
The inbound side.
Yes, the inbound benefits. Contrast the Peppol reality with the status quo. Today, AP departments are drowning in unstructured PDF invoices. To process those, you rely on optical character recognition or OCR technology. And let's be honest about what OCR actually is.
It's text extraction.
It is algorithmic guessing. OCR looks at a pixelated image, a picture of an invoice, and guesses if a curve is a number 5 or the letter S.
Yeah, well, it's pretty good guessing, usually.
But it's still guessing. It guesses if a string of numbers is a total amount or a phone number based on its physical location on the page. And because it's guessing, it requires constant, expensive human exception handling.
That is true.
AP clerks spend their days fixing OCR mistakes. Peppol documents, on the other hand, arrive in structured, machine-readable XML formats like UBL or CII. They have mathematically validated structures and standardized field definitions.
Right.
The tag for invoice total is always the same. An AP system can read that data flawlessly, instantly, without a human ever looking at it. So if you wait for a government mandate to force your hand, you are leaving massive operational savings on the table by delaying fully automated, touchless inbound invoice processing.
See, your argument hinges on the idea that if an organization builds this sophisticated inbound capability, the data will just magically flow in.
It's not magic, it's enablement.
Let's shift to analogy slightly. Peppol is essentially a telephone network. A telephone, no matter how technologically advanced, is completely useless if your contacts don't own one.
Sure.
If you want to achieve that pristine, OCR-free accounts payable automation outside of jurisdictions where the government has already mandated Peppol, your organization has to take on the massive operational burden of evangelizing the network.
I wouldn't call it an operational burden. I'd call it basic supplier enablement.
It is absolutely a burden. You have to invest heavily in building a supplier onboarding program. You have to call your suppliers, educate them about what a Peppol access point is, convince them to change their billing software processes.
It's not that dramatic.
And hold their hands through the technical setup. That is an enormous operational cost that falls squarely on your procurement and IT teams. Therefore, letting government mandates act as the bad guy is vastly more cost-effective.
The bad guy?
Yeah, you let the European Union or the Singaporean government incur the cost of evangelization. They pass the laws, they issue the fines, and they force the suppliers onto the network.
But you wait years for that.
But once the suppliers are legally compelled to join, then your AP department reaps the inbound benefits. You don't spend millions building the network yourself. You wait for the mandate to build it for you for free.
That is a very, very passive way to run a global supply chain. You are assuming that supplier onboarding is an insurmountable mountain where you have to call 5,000 individual mom-and-pop vendors.
It can feel like that for IT teams.
But large buying organizations have immense leverage. And you don't need every supplier on day one. You apply the Pareto principle.
The 80-20 rule.
Exactly. If you mandate Peppol connectivity for your top 20% of suppliers, the enterprise vendors who generate 80% of your invoice volume, you fundamentally transform your accounts payable cost structure within a single fiscal year. You don't need the government to be the bad guy. You just put it in your vendor contracts.
But even if you use procurement leverage, the network's value depends entirely on how your IT architecture handles the connection. If you take the mandate-first approach, the IT implementation is incredibly straightforward. You utilize a third-party Peppol access point provider.
And you just outsource the whole thing?
Exactly, because that is the most efficient path. In Peppol's four-corner model, your internal system is corner 1. Your access point is corner 2. That access point handles all the incredibly heavy technical lifting. It manages the cryptographic signing of the documents. It ensures complete compliance with the Open Peppol Trust Framework, updating certificates so you don't have to. It executes the routing based on the SMP lookups we discussed earlier.
Which is fine for delivery, but
Why on earth would an organization overcomplicate this with a massive, expensive internal ERP integration project if an access point provider can simply check the compliance box? You hook your system up to a certified provider via basic API. You map the specific outbound invoice format required by the French or German MANTI, and you are done.
you're done with the bare minimum.
You are compliant, you avoid the regulatory fines, and your IT team can move on to actual core business priorities.
Because that creates a catastrophic technical debt. I fundamentally reject this compliance box mentality. If you only build point solutions for a specific country mandates through an outsourced provider, you are hard-coding siloed workflows.
It's not siloed if it works.
It is. You're basically buying a sophisticated universal translator device that you only use to speak to the government, while you continue to use smoke signals to talk to your actual suppliers. To truly utilize Peppol, you must build around a canonical data model.
Hold on, let's ground this. When you throw around terms like canonical data model, what does that actually look like for an IT director who is staring down a massive, heavily customized legacy SAP or Oracle system right now?
Well,
Are you suggesting they need to rip and replace their core database just to send an e-invoice?
no, not a rip and replace, but a fundamental middleware translation layer. A canonical data model means your ERP generates a single, universal, incredibly rich data structure internally. It's an abstraction layer.
Right.
Your core system isn't worrying about whether the destination requires the French-specific format, the Japanese format, or the Australian format. It outputs one standardized master document.
And then the middleware handles it.
Right, then your architecture or even your deeply integrated access point translates that canonical format into whatever the Peppol network requires for that specific transaction. If you don't build that, you are building 50 different custom IT outputs for 50 different compliance regimes.
Well,
But even more critically, treating the access point as a hands-off compliance box completely ignores document status management.
how so? The access point delivers the document. It provides the legal receipt.
Delivering the document is only the first step. Peppol isn't just a delivery pipe. It generates a continuous stream of status events. It provides delivery confirmations, acceptance responses, and crucial business-level rejection notifications.
Okay, sure.
So let's say you treat this as a fire-and-forget compliance box. You don't build a bidirectional ERP integration. Your ERP generates an invoice and sends it out. Your ERP system now says that invoice was successfully sent.
Which it was.
But the Peppol network knows that the invoice was actually rejected by the buyer system 2 minutes later because of a mismatched purchase order number or an invalid unit of measure.
And the access point catches that rejection.
Yes, the access point catches it. But because you didn't deeply integrate the inbound status messages back into your core system, your accounts receivable department is totally blind.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, they look at the ERP and think they are getting paid in 30 days. They aren't. 30 days later, they call the buyer to ask where the money is. And the buyer says, we rejected that via Peppol a month ago. You completely destroy your organization's audit trails and reconciliation processes. A compliance-only outsourced implementation handles outbound delivery but completely misses the operational reality of the network.
That is a very real risk, I'll admit. But I think you are underestimating how these status messages are actually consumed by mid-market and enterprise teams today.
How so?
Many organizations successfully handle exception management within the third-party provider's portal. It doesn't all have to sync perfectly into SAP on day one.
But it should.
Maybe eventually. But let's look at what building that deep canonical data model actually means. It is a multi-year, multi-million-dollar ERP overhaul. The architecture built today dictates tomorrow's capabilities. Absolutely. But what is the ultimate measurable end state of the Peppol network for a CFO looking at their budget?
Automation.
No, it is regulatory future-proofing.
That is aiming far too low.
It is aiming at what is quantifiable today. The primary benefit of being on Peppol is that the direction of regulatory travel globally is converging on this single interoperability framework.
Well, yes, that's true.
Once you build a pragmatic connection through a capable access point provider, every single new country mandate that comes online over the next decade can be met through a simple configuration change rather than an entirely new software development project.
Right.
Your initial network investment is amortized across current and future mandates. That is true, measurable value. You don't need to justify a massive internal integration project by chasing theoretical accounts payable efficiencies. You justify it by eliminating the cost of future IT compliance projects.
But if you stop at regulatory future-proofing, you are missing the most profound shift occurring in enterprise finance right now. We have to look further down the horizon to the Internet of Agents.
The AI agents.
Yes. Enterprise finance is rapidly moving toward continuous, autonomous systems. We are talking about AI and software agents that execute complex financial processes without human intervention.
Right.
Think about it. An autonomous AP validation agent or a complex AI payment matching algorithm cannot run on unstructured PDFs. They cannot run on disjointed portal downloads.
Autonomous agents are certainly the topic of the moment, but they're still largely theoretical for the average mid-market or even enterprise organization dealing with legacy systems.
They won't be theoretical for long, and the underlying data is the bottleneck. Earlier, we talked about OCR guessing a 5 versus an S.
Yeah.
When a human clerk sees that mistake, they use context to fix it. When an AI agent encounters that mistake, it cascades into a catastrophic failure across the ledger. AI requires mathematical certainty to operate without human supervision.
Which Peppol provides.
Exactly. They require precisely what the Peppol network natively guarantees: standardized identifiers, mathematically validated UBL data structures, and certified sender identity to prevent accounts payable fraud.
I see where you're going with this.
The organizations that are waiting for mandates, the ones building minimum viable connections just to satisfy a tax authority, are going to be left structurally behind. While their AP clerks are still manually logging into a third-party portal to download rejection notices, their competitors will be deploying autonomous agents directly on top of their deep, canonical Peppol infrastructure.
The network effect compounds, basically.
It does. The more of your document exchange that occurs through structured, machine-processable channels, the more of your workflow can be handed over to autonomous systems. Peppol isn't a tax reporting pipe. It is the foundational layer for machine-to-machine commerce.
I actually don't disagree that machine-to-machine commerce is the destination. Where we differ is the route we take to get there.
Fair enough.
The pragmatic approach is recognizing that we don't have to force the future before it is ready. We can let the global regulatory environment pave the road for us.
By waiting?
By utilizing access points to meet immediate mandates, we naturally build the infrastructure over time. We amortize the costs, we avoid the massive upfront risk of enterprise-wide ERP overhauls, and we still arrive at the exact same destination.
I'm just not sure the timing works out as neatly as you say.
Those intelligent agents you are talking about, they will work just fine when the time comes, because the data will be structured by the mandates that forced everyone to use the standard in the first place. You don't have to be the pioneer taking arrows in your back. You can be the settler who builds on the roads the government's forced into existence.
It is a fascinating division in strategy. Ultimately, my view is that treating Peppol merely as a tax compliance tool is a massive missed opportunity. It is a foundational pillar of the modern digital economy. Relegating it to an IT backlog item to be dealt with only when a mandate forces your hand is, in my opinion, a strategic failure. It requires proactive, deep ERP integration, a canonical data model, and a CFO-level strategy to fully utilize its capability for AP automation today and to lay the rigorous mathematical groundwork for the autonomous financial agents of tomorrow.
And from my vantage point, while Peppol is undeniably powerful and elegantly designed from an architectural standpoint, its immediate practical value is best captured by following those regulatory mandates.
Following the rules, essentially.
By pragmatically checking the compliance boxes through capable third-party access points, an organization naturally participates in the network effect. You achieve regulatory future-proofing and cost amortization without requiring premature, highly disruptive enterprise overhauls. Let the mandates build a network.
Yet, despite our different angles of approach, there is a profound point of convergence here that I think anyone listening needs to take away. We both agree that Peppol represents the absolute end of the fragmented, bilateral EDI era.
Absolutely. The days of spending weeks in custom IT negotiations for every new trading partner, setting up AS2 servers, and mapping custom flat files are over.
Thank goodness.
Right? The question of how do we technically connect to this specific supplier, that's permanently being replaced with a much simpler universal question: are they on the network?
Precisely. The shift is already happening. It is crucial to look at digital infrastructure from multiple strategic angles, because the architectural decisions made today will absolutely define the operational realities of tomorrow. Take a hard look at how your own organization handles B2B document exchange.
Are you still laying down new tracks and changing engines at every single border crossing?
Or are you preparing to merge onto the universal network? There is much more to explore in the architecture of digital commerce, and we leave that consideration with you.